Welcome to the Morning Walk with Murty Digital Stroll.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so picture this. It's 2012, and a man named Gary Harrington walks out of the front gate of his home in rural Oregon and goes straight into a jail cell.
Right.
And he wasn't locked up for theft. He wasn't convicted of fraud or any kind of violence, He went to prison, paid heavy fines, and literally had his property destroyed, all for catching rain on his own 172 acres of land.
It's just wild to think about.
It is. I'm the mentor of the Antaryami VA Academy, operating today as your wisdom seeker for this Gurukul 2.0 focus, and that bizarre paradox is exactly where we begin today. Joining me is the architect of Antaryami, bringing a strategic auditor perspective to our digital migration.
It is a phenomenal starting point, really, because by looking at Harrington's story through the Digital Prism, we're extracting the actual legacy code of Project Antaryami.
Yeah.
We're examining how ancient, practically unhackable survival systems are suddenly colliding with the failing infrastructure of the modern world.
Right, because Harrington didn't just set out a couple of buckets on his lawn, did he?
No, not at all. Over a decade, he engineered a highly sophisticated, closed-loop water system.
A massive one, yeah. I mean, he constructed 3 separate reservoirs and 3 dams on his property. 2 of those dams were 10 feet high, and one was 20 feet high.
Which is a serious engineering feat.
Exactly. He was storing nearly 13 million gallons of precipitation, and his primary stated goal for this was to protect his heavily forested land from wildfires. I mean, he didn't tap into a municipal grid, he didn't drain a public river, and he wasn't, siphoning off his neighbor's well. He just caught the precipitation that fell naturally from the sky onto his own dirt.
But the state of Oregon ordered him to drain every single drop.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah, and when he refused to comply, they literally sent the police. He was convicted on 9 misdemeanor charges, handed a 30-day jail sentence, and a $1,500 fine. And it gets worse. The state then came in and physically destroyed his dams with locks and chains so they could never be operational again. I mean, Harrington stood outside the courthouse and argued that the government was acting as a massive bully, basically stripping a man of his natural right to the elements.
Which, brings up a massive question for anyone listening. How on earth does catching the rain become a criminal offense? We have to look at the legal software running in the background here. Because the law that jailed him wasn't some modern, hyper-strict environmental regulation.
No, it wasn't.
It was written in 1925. That was the year the Medford Water Commission was granted permanent ownership of the entire Big Butte watershed.
Right. And as the strategic auditor here, let's unpack why that law exists. The commission was in the process of selling municipal bonds to finance a 31-mile pipeline.
Okay.
And this pipeline was designed to pull water from a mountain spring directly to the growing city. So, to sell those bonds, the utility needed an absolute ironclad guarantee on their investment.
Makes sense from a financial perspective.
Exactly. The 1925 statute essentially gave them permanent control over every single molecule of precipitation in that specific basin. Their argument was that the rain hitting Harrington's property would eventually, inevitably, flow down into a creek that fed the water supply they legally owned.
But to really grasp how this legal framework was built, we have to rewind even further than 1925.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to go back to the 1849 California Gold Rush and a legal concept called the doctrine of prior appropriation.
The old mining laws.
Yeah, exactly. The simplest translation is basically first in time, first in right.
Right. So imagine the thousands of miners flooding the Sierra Nevada, right? There's abundant water in the mountains, but the miners need that water at their specific, often remote claims to separate the gold from the dirt.
And those claims might be miles away from a natural flowing river.
Right. So the logic they developed was entirely pragmatic for a frontier economy. The very first person to dig a channel, build a flume, and divert the stream owned the exclusive right to use that specific amount of water.
It was a system designed specifically to fuel industrial mining operations using rivers and streams. But as cities started growing and municipal utilities formed, they adopted this exact same frontier mining law.
And then they applied it to the sky.
Yeah, they used first in time, first in right to claim the rain itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is honestly like someone claiming ownership of the Wi-Fi signal in the air just because they were the first person to buy a router in your neighborhood.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. You turn on your phone on your own porch, and they have you arrested for stealing their invisible signal before it reaches their living room.
It's the abstraction of the law stretched to its absolute breaking point. You have a legal code built for a guy with a pickaxe in 1849 being used to criminalize a homeowner with a reservoir in 2012.
But let's look at this from the city's perspective for a moment, just to be totally impartial. Because if a municipality issues millions of dollars in bonds to build a 31-mile pipeline, and their citizens rely on that water to drink, bathe, and survive, didn't they have a right to protect that source?
Well, sure.
If every single person living upstream decides to build a 20-foot dam on their property, the city goes dry. The entire municipal system just collapses.
That is the counter-argument, and it's valid. The state's actions were entirely coherent within the mechanical boundaries of the system they built.
Right.
The 1925 statute handed the commission legal ownership to protect that massive infrastructure investment. They were simply executing the code of the law exactly as it was written to ensure the city survived.
They were just running the software.
Exactly. But the fact that we are relying on a century-old mining law to dictate our modern relationship with the sky, that reveals a severe glitch. It highlights a massive vulnerability in our centralized grids. And honestly, it makes us question why we abandoned humanity's original operating system in the first place.
The 6,000-year-old legacy code.
Yes.
Because when you look at history, catching the rain wasn't a crime. It was the fundamental building block of civilization. Long before we had centralized utilities and multi-million-dollar municipal bonds, people were harvesting water with astonishing efficiency, using literally nothing but gravity.
Let's take the Negev Desert around 2000 BC. I mean, this is one of the harshest, most arid environments on the planet, yet entire cities thrived there.
Without any major rivers.
Right. They didn't have massive rivers to dam. Instead, they engineered vast limestone catchment systems carved directly into the hillsides. They basically transformed the entire topography of their environment into a funnel, directing sparse desert rainfall into agricultural terraces and covered cisterns.
The scale of the engineering is incredible. And it wasn't just in the desert either. Look at the Yucatan Maya.
Oh, their system was brilliant.
Right. They lived in this porous limestone environment that acts like a giant sponge. Any rain that falls just gets swallowed directly underground. They had almost no natural surface water, no major rivers cutting through their cities. So they engineered subterranean bottle-shaped chambers called choltons right beneath their city plazas.
A cholton is just a brilliant piece of engineering. They would dig through the topsoil, carve out these massive bell-shaped cavities in the bedrock, and plaster the walls to make them completely watertight.
Which is crazy to think about doing with ancient tools.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And the city plazas above them were paved and slightly sloped. So when the tropical rains came, the entire city square acted as a catchment surface, channeling thousands of gallons of clean water directly into these underground reserves.
Right.
I mean, they fed massive populations without a single flowing river.
And you see variations of this everywhere. Like in ancient Rome, long before the famous aqueducts were spanning the valleys, archaeologists found terracotta pipes running straight from Roman rooftops into highly advanced household cisterns beneath the floorboards.
Wow.
Yeah, and ancient Palestine around 4000 BC had waterproof lime plaster cisterns built directly into the foundations of permanent homes. And then there is ancient India.
Right, the Indus Valley civilization around 5000 BC. In regions like modern-day Gujarat and Rajasthan, they carved massive rock-cut cisterns called kunds directly into the landscape.
And these weren't small, right?
No, we aren't talking about small clay pots here. The labor required to carve these out of solid rock with ancient tools is just staggering. A single household kun could hold up to 50,000 gallons of water.
50,000 gallons for one household, operating entirely off-grid thousands of years ago. I mean, it really forces a hard philosophical question about how we live now.
It really does.
Like, why did humanity intentionally uninstall a perfectly resilient, gravity-powered operating system for one that requires massive municipal debt, incredibly fragile supply chains, and centralized control? We essentially traded unhackable resilience for the illusion of modern convenience.
We abandoned a system that worked for millennia because the modern grid promised infinite abundance. But that promise is currently collapsing visibly and catastrophically.
Yeah, the numbers are terrifying.
They are. The urgency for a digital migration back to this legacy code is dictated by sheer mathematics now. In January 2026, the United Nations officially declared that the world has entered an era of global water bankruptcy.
See, that specific terminology is what gets me. They didn't call it water stress. They didn't call it a water crisis. Bankruptcy implies a point of no return.
Exactly. In financial terms, bankruptcy means the principal is gone. The savings accounts are completely empty, and the depletion is now outpacing any mathematical possibility of natural recovery.
So what are the actual metrics backing that up?
The metrics are grim. Currently, 71% of the world's underground aquifers are declining. 4 billion people, literally half the planet, face severe water scarcity for at least part of the year.
And the physical consequences of draining these aquifers are literally altering the geography of our cities. Take Mexico City.
Well, it's a perfect example.
It is currently sinking up to 20 inches a year in some areas. When you pump billions of gallons of water out of clay-heavy subterranean soil, the pores in that soil collapse. The ground physically compresses under the weight of the city above it, and it does not bounce back when it rains.
It's irreversible.
Yeah, the city is essentially swallowing itself because the centralized grid demands more water than the earth actually holds.
And then you look at surface water. The Colorado River Compact is a prime example of a legal glitch failing against physical reality.
Right, because that was written, 100 years ago?
Exactly. It was an agreement drawn up a century ago governing water distribution for 40 million people across the American Southwest. The problem is that the quotas were based on river flow measurements taken during an unusually wet period in the 1920s.
So they locked in legal obligations based on a best-case scenario that simply no longer exists.
Yes.
The river shrank, the climate changed, but the legal obligations to deliver billions of gallons of water didn't budge. The compact is legally broken because the math just no longer maps to reality.
Right. And while our ground reserves collapse and our surface rivers dry up, the sky is still delivering.
Always.
The contrast between the ancient efficiency of those Maya coltons and our modern waste is staggering. Let's just look at the math of a modern suburban home for a second. An average 2,000 square foot American roof yields 12,250 gallons of water from just 1 single inch of rain.
Let that sink in for everyone listening. 1 inch of rain on a standard roof gives you over 1,000 gallons. Considering the average American home receives between 25 and 50 inches of rainfall a year, that single roof is capable of capturing between 30,000 and 60,000 gallons annually.
That is an enormous volume of water.
It really is. It is enough to irrigate a massive garden, flush every toilet in the house, run the laundry, and drastically cut a family's reliance on a failing municipal grid.
But look at what actually happens to those 60,000 gallons right now. It hits the asphalt shingles, washes down the aluminum gutters, hits the concrete driveway, and sweeps motor oil, lawn fertilizers, and road chemicals straight into our municipal storm drains.
Just totally wasted.
Completely. It overwhelms the city infrastructure, causes localized flooding, and recharges absolutely nothing. It benefits no one.
The tragedy of this waste is mind-blowing. What ancient societies in the Negev Desert or Rajasthan would view as a catastrophic, life-threatening failure of design, modern suburban America just treats as the default setting.
Right.
We actively engineer our homes to throw away a vital resource as quickly as possible.
Because the default setting of our infrastructure is deeply flawed. The solution requires transitioning from this macro-level systemic failure down to a micro-level actionable patch.
Okay, so let's get into the practical side of this Gurukul session.
Implementing this legacy code on your own property doesn't require a master's degree in engineering. We're looking at a scalable DIY off-grid water utility formula that costs between $250 and $800 to deploy.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of this migration piece by piece. The very first component is the catchment surface, which is your roof. And the cost here is $0 because it's already sitting over your head. A metal roof is the absolute best option for harvesting pristine water. But standard asphalt shingles work perfectly fine as long as you have the proper filtration later in the system.
The next component is the most critical mechanical intervention in the entire setup, the first flush diverter. This is an upgrade that costs maybe $15 to $30.
See, this is my favorite piece of the puzzle because it is so incredibly clever. Think about your roof during a dry spell. For a week or two, it collects pollen, dust, bird droppings, and chemical residue from the air.
It gets filthy.
Yeah. So when it finally rains, that very first wash of water sweeping down your gutters is incredibly dirty. You absolutely do not want that initial sludge washing into your pristine drinking tank.
Right. And the first flush diverter solves this purely through the mechanics of gravity.
Exactly. It is essentially a simple PVC standpipe that sits in line between your downspout and your main storage tank. The general math is to install about 1 gallon of PVC pipe capacity for every 100 square feet of roof space.
Okay, so how does it actually catch the dirt?
Well, when the rain starts, the dirty water rushes down the gutter and naturally drops into this vertical PVC pipe first. As it rains, the pipe fills up with that contaminated first wash. Inside the pipe is a small plastic ball. As the water level rises, the ball floats up until it hits a restrictor ring at the top, perfectly sealing off the dirty pipe.
That is so simple. Once that pipe is sealed, all the beautifully clean water that follows just skips right over the top of the sealed valve and flows straight into your storage tank.
Exactly.
And then between storms, a tiny weep hole at the bottom of the PVC pipe slowly drips the dirty water out, resetting the system for the next rain. It requires no electricity, no sensors, and no moving parts other than a floating ball. It is just an elegant, gravity-powered solution.
From there, the clean water enters your storage. For this, the most accessible approach is using 275-gallon food-grade IBC totes.
Those are the big square ones, right?
Yeah, intermediate bulk containers, essentially giant plastic cubes in a metal cage. You can easily source them used from agricultural or food transport companies for about $80 to $150 each. If you link 2 of them together at the bottom with a simple PVC pipe, you instantly have a 550-gallon battery of water storage.
That's a lot of capacity for cheap.
Right. You drop a fine mesh screen over the inlet to keep mosquitoes from breeding, run an overflow pipe away from your foundation for heavy storms, and the bulk of the work is done.
And the final stage is filtration. If the objective is simply to water a garden or wash a car, the mesh screen on the intake tank is entirely sufficient.
Right, keep it simple.
But if the goal is to route this water inside the house to supply laundry machines or toilets, adding a standard sediment and carbon block filter costing between $75 and $150 will remove fine particles and discoloration.
And if you want to actually drink it, which billions of people across the globe do every day, you pass that filtered water through a UV sterilizer. A residential UV unit runs between $100 and $200.
And that kills everything.
Yeah, as the water flows past the ultraviolet light, any lingering bacteria or pathogens are instantly neutralized. At that point, the water coming out of your tap will match and often exceed the purity of the chemically treated municipal drinking water you are currently buying from the city.
But before undertaking this migration, you have to understand the legal terrain in your specific region. As we saw with Gary Harrington, the law can be a brutal adversary.
Definitely.
However, the current map for residential collection is generally very favorable. In 46 out of the 50 U.S. states, there are absolutely no restrictions on rainwater collection.
In some regions, the government will actually pay you to do it. Texas offers up to $5,000 in rebates and property tax exemptions for installing water harvesting equipment.
It's amazing.
Yeah, Arizona actively incentivizes residential setups to reduce pressure on the grid. Even California, which is notorious for strict environmental and building codes, requires absolutely no permit for non-potable rainwater collection.
Yet, the ghost of prior appropriations still haunts certain areas of the country.
Where specifically?
Well, in Colorado, the law strictly caps rainwater collection at 110 gallons per household. That equates to just 2 standard 55-gallon barrels, and the state mandates it can only be used outdoors.
Wow, so you can't even run it inside?
Nope. Utah has modernized slightly, allowing residents to capture up to 2,500 gallons, but it requires filing a free registration with the state so they can track the water diversion.
You know, even with those regional limits, I think about what this means for the average person living in a standard suburban house. Pulling together IBC totes, PVC standpipes, and UV sterilizers might sound a bit intimidating at first.
Sure, it sounds highly technical.
Yeah, you might think you need 10 acres in the woods and a hardcore survivalist mindset to pull this off, but you really don't. Think of it like installing a personal solar panel system, only infinitely cheaper and mechanically simpler.
The solar analogy is perfect. Installing a solar grid requires complex electrical inverters, incredibly expensive lithium batteries, and professional electricians to wire it safely into your home. A rainwater system requires a power drill, a can of PVC glue, and a free weekend.
Exactly. And when you install solar panels, you aren't completely disconnecting from the electrical grid and going dark. You are simply supplementing your power, lowering your bills, and creating a buffer of resilience if a storm knocks out the neighborhood power lines.
Right.
Rainwater harvesting is the exact same philosophy. You aren't cutting your city water line with a hacksaw. You are just intercepting the 30,000 gallons of perfectly good water hitting your roof instead of letting it wash chemicals into the street.
Yeah.
You are shifting your posture from being merely a consumer of resources to becoming a producer.
You are reclaiming your independence from a system that is showing profound signs of stress. As we bring this digital stroll to a natural close, we must connect the ancient past, Gary Harrington's legal battle, and the immediate future.
It's all connected.
It is.
Yeah.
The United Nations data leaves no room for ambiguity. The droughts and the municipal shortages are not a matter of if, but when. The central grids and the massive supply chains we assume will always be there are fundamentally failing under the weight of their own design.
But the unhackable knowledge of the Rajasthan builders carving the Kuns, the Maya engineers designing Choltons, and the ancient Romans running terracotta pipes hasn't disappeared. That legacy code is literally waiting on our rooftops.
It's right there.
All it requires is a pipe, a storage tank, and the patience for gravity to do its work.
It is the ultimate form of decentralization. We highly encourage you to keep looking at the world, your infrastructure, and your own backyard through the digital prism.
We spent this entire Gurukul session looking at water, but it leaves us with a provocative thought to ponder as you go about your day. If our ancestors engineered entire civilizations around catching the rain, and we spent the last century engineering cities to drain it away as quickly as possible, what other vital legacy code for human survival have we accidentally classified as waste? Thanks for walking with us. See you next time.